The impacts of meteorites, asteroids, or comets did not strip Mars of soil and rock and then transfer it all to the Earth. This means it is incapable of transporting the incredible amount of material that fell upon Earth during the Exodus and at the distance between the planets we see today. Besides, John's account does not mention the impact of a comet or asteroid on the source planet. Moreover, Revelation makes it clear that Wormwood, the planet Mars, is very close to Earth, seemingly falling upon the Earth. No matter how close Mars was to Earth or will be in the near future, gravity alone does not account for the transfer of material from the red planet to our globe. Earth's gravity is not strong enough to pull material from the Martian surface towards its own. Another force is required, one strong enough to overcome the gravity of Mars. That force is the electrical force. The electrical force will be a prominent player in the coming apocalypse. John saw electricity in its various forms on full display. Electrical discharges, lightning, emanated from the throne of God and from His temple. Lightning preceded the appearance of wormwood and a great storm of hail falling on the earth. Electrical discharges were also used by the Lord in the great battle of Armageddon at the end of the world. Lightning from heaven enlightened the entire terrestrial globe during the Exodus, as King David in Job declared. Clearly, this was not the localized lightning we see today. The scriptures also speak of fire sent down to earth from the heavens, wrecking destruction and death. This fire was not lightning. It was recognized as something different and identified separately. It was called Fire of the Lord. When the Israelites complained too about their situation in the wilderness, especially having only manna to eat, the Lord became angry and sent down fire consuming those that complained. It continued until Moses prayed unto the Lord. The Lord also sent fire down to consume the 250 rebels who sought priestly authority. As Israel was about to enter into the Promised Land, the Lord promised to send His fire before them to destroy their enemies. John the Revelator also saw fire come down from heaven. It did not come from the Lord, but from a beast with two horns like a lamb. Later, at the end of the millennium, the fire from heaven did come from the Lord, who used it to destroy Satan and his enemies. Though the scriptures are not specific in their descriptions of the fire of the Lord, we do know what it looked like. As Immanuel Velikovsky rightly pointed out in Worlds in Collision, the ancients obsessively portrayed the fire, which they called the thunderbolt, in their statues, artwork, and ritual objects. With the advent of modern high-energy plasma physics, we now can identify the forms which the ancients called the thunderbolts of God. The forms of the divine thunderbolt can now be identified as plasmoids. Plasma discharges produce a variety of independent and coherent structures. Some of these structures are called plasmoids. Plasmoids are formed along electrical discharge lines by what are known as pinches. A well-known plasmoid is ball lightning. But the thunderbolts of the gods were quite different in shape from the beads of bead lightning or the balls of ball lightning. In its basic form, the thunderbolt had a corkscrew shape. Other forms had the appearance of a flower, like sepal protuberances and lotus-like petals. At times, the thunderbolts had tine-like projections, which became Poseidon's trident and Ninurta's arrow. The thunderbolt became a divine spear or an arrow. The Lord used the thunderbolt as spear and arrow during the Exodus. He will throw them once again when he returns. The forms of the thunderbolt were not random, nor were they flights of imagination on the part of the ancients. They were consistent patterns with an underlying structure. The forms follow a well-defined metamorphosis from one shape to another during an energetic plasma discharge. These same shapes have been reproduced in plasma laboratories. As plasma phenomena are scalable, these forms can also be found in space. Both planets, Mars and Earth, are charged bodies, and when they approach each other naturally exchange electrical discharges. These discharges are analogous to lightning, but are orders of magnitude larger and more powerful. When they struck the Earth, they shook the whole planet. The interplanetary lightning shook the Earth and, at the same time, broke up the entire face of the Earth, creating great fissures and cracks and ripping rock from the surface. The Book of Mormon recorded the devastation caused by electrical discharge during the crucifixion event, another planetary catastrophe. The prophet Nephi saw the same event. He saw the lightning rend rock, tumble mountains into pieces, and break up the flat pieces of the earth. Even whole cities sunk into the earth. The geologic destruction caused by the discharges was so great that when the event was over and the survivors had taken stock, they found the new promised land to be unrecognizable. The Lord broke up the earth at the time of the Exodus as well. For a plasma discharge to transfer material, rock, and dust from one planet to another, it must first dislodge the material from the surface of the donor planet. The discharge must break up the surface so that there is loose material available to be lifted up and eventually deposited elsewhere. Plasma discharges are known to gouge surfaces and break off surface material, as this laboratory experiment demonstrates. Secondly, the volume of material excavated from Mars, sufficient to cover Egypt and much of the world in red dust and rock, must have been stupendous. The physical scars of removing such a large amount of material must be visible on the red planet. Given the lack of an atmosphere and water, the scars would have remained untouched by erosion. A quick look at the planet reveals such a scar, the mammoth Valles Marineris. Though there is no firm evidence to prove that the blood that fell upon Egypt and the world at the time of the Exodus came from Valles Marineris, it is a good candidate. Its sheer size would have provided enough sediment and rock to explain the plague of blood. In comparison, the Grand Canyon is only 500 miles long and is, at most, a mile deep. Valles Marineris is approximately 5 times larger than Earth's largest canyon. Scientists have proposed many theories as to the origin of the largest canyon in the solar system, but none of the theories explain all of its features. In the end, as a NASA report admitted, they just don't know how it came to be. Proponents of the electric universe, on the other hand, are confident that Valles Marineris is a giant electrical scar. It was the electrical engineer Ralph Jurgens who first proposed an electric origin for the canyon. Later, physicist Wallace Thornhill made the claim that Valles Marineris was created in a matter of minutes by an electric arc. If Thornhill's claim of creating such a huge canyon in only a few minutes seems preposterous, then the Book of Mormon account of the crucifixion events provides needed perspective. It took no more than 3 hours to wholly deform the Promised Land. Electricity can do its work very quickly. Valles Marineris, the Grand Canyon of Mars, was carved out in less than an hour. The agent was a plasmoid similar to the simulation pictured. The plasmoid was composed of several cylinders and pinched at the end.
Current flow can metamorphose into secondary cylinders in fractal-like substructures to be pinched by the induced magnetic fields into a narrow, highly focused discharge. In the largest scale events carving the surface of Mars, we envision multiple columns of charged particles being pinched into a narrow discharge at the surface. This established principle will be crucial to comprehending the giant Valles Marineris with all of its accompanying chasms.
The excavation of Mars during the Exodus, whether or not Valles Marineris was involved, created enormous amounts of rocky debris, some of which fell back to Mars, while some was sent into space and ended up falling upon the Earth.
Keep in mind as well that an electric discharge at energies necessary to create the chasm of Valles Marineris would have ejected great volumes of rocky material into space. Much of the rocky debris would have fallen back to litter the Martian landscape. And indeed, shattered rock of all sizes across the surface of Mars is a long-standing mystery, and the mystery is resolved by electrical events on a continental and even hemispheric scale. Given the energies of the events, considerable volumes of material would have surely escaped the planet altogether. And what might this tell us about the Mars-Earth connection in our reconstruction of ancient events? Or the surprising discovery that rocks from Mars have fallen on our own planet?
The rock excavated from Mars became a plague of hail that fell upon Egypt. As we previously explained, the hail of the Exodus was a barrage of bolides, fiery meteorites, that fell upon Egypt. But it wasn't the rock that caused the waters to become blood. It was the dust, and there was plenty of it.
In the electrical interpretation, the violent excavation of the surface to create Valles Marineris would have created immense deposits of sediment on surrounding topography. And indeed, we see that previous craters in the region were completely buried, with only the largest craters appearing as outlines penetrating through the deep deposits.
This loose red sediment was then easily lifted from the surface by the electrical force and transported directly to Earth. Plasmoids were not necessary. This laboratory experiment demonstrates the two-way transfer of loose material between two charged elements, the sphere above and the surface below. Lightning discharges are present at times, but material is exchanged with or without their presence. While plasmoids were gouging the planet Mars during the Exodus, the same process was occurring on Earth. Plasmoids of stupendous size defaced the Earth's surface with fissures, cracks, and trenches. Job witnessed the destruction. Given the scale of the electrical exchanges between the two planets, the scarring would be tremendous in size and not easily erasable by erosion. In other words, thousands of years after an event like the Exodus, the scars would remain and, like Valles Marineris, would be visible even from great distances. Valles Marineris, for example, is well preserved and so large that it is easily visible from Earth with a 16-inch telescope. Effects on Earth should also remain from the Exodus. From a view on the ground, electrical scarring does not necessarily look like electricity was involved. At ground level, the Grand Canyon does appear to the untrained eye to have been created by the Colorado River. But when seen from space, it becomes immediately recognizable as an electrical scar. The only caution would be that the crucifixion event would have created additional scarring after the Exodus. Discerning which scar belongs to which event is difficult, if not impossible at this point. But whichever event created the scarring on Earth, the scars would look the same. Terrestrial electrical scarring is not transparent from ground level. However, again, from the vantage point of space, vast fields of electrical scarring appear across the globe. Closer views reveal even more extensive scarring. There's almost no portion of the Earth's surface that was not touched by an electrical discharge, primarily from Mars.